Chapter 3. When Edric and Antwerpen reached Sir Ambrose, they found Father Morris at his side, explaining with his usual promptness and clearness the meaning of the different signs of the telegraph. "My dear Edric," exclaimed Sir Ambrose, throwing himself into the arms of his son. "My dear, dear Edric, your brother has gained the battle. The Germans are completely overthrown. He has taken their king and several of their princes prisoners, and the fine province of France is ceded to us entirely." "I am rejoiced to hear it," cried Edric, returning his father's embrace with emotion. "And I hope he is safe?" "I hope so too," replied Sir Ambrose, "though he says nothing of himself. But now you know Edmund. Our troops won this, our army gained that. The soldiers fought bravely. He never speaks of himself. To hear him relate a battle, nobody would imagine that he had ever had anything to do with it." "It's too dark to see any more," said Father Morris, who had been for some time watching the telegraph, but now turned from it in despair. "The machine is still in motion, but it is too dark for me to decipher what it means." The attention of all present was directed to the sky as he spoke. It was indeed become of pitchy blackness. The general gloom seemed to hang over the face of nature. The birds flew twittering for shelter. A low wind moaned through the trees, and in short, everything seemed to portend a storm. "We had better return to the house," said Dr. Edward, looking around with something like fear at these alarming indications, for his heated imagination had not yet quite recovered the effect of the awful speculations he had so lately been indulging in. "What is a black spot there? I declare it moves. Good heavens, what can it be?" "Really, Doctor," replied Edward, "you provoke the action of my risible faculties. The opaque body which you perceived at a little distance, at which seems to have been occasioned such a fearful excitement of your nervous system, is only a living specimen of Corvus Genus, who has probably descended upon earth to search for his vermicular repast." "I beg your pardon, Mr. Abelard," rejoined Mr. Davis, speaking with his usual precision, "but according to my humble apprehension, you'll labor under a slight mistake as to the particular. The feathered biped has so forcibly attracted your attention appears to me not one of the corvi, but rather one of the graculae, a variety of extremely rare occurrence in the vicinity, and which are sometimes called incendera avis, for their unfortunate propensity to the habitations of combustion. By picking up small pieces of phosphinated carbon and carrying them in their beaks to the combination of straw and the other materials, sometimes piled upon the apex of a house to defend it from the inroads of plavescity." "It is of no use," sighed Sir Ambrose, who, straining his eyes to endeavor to decipher the movements of the telegraph, the outlines of which only now appeared, stamped as if in jet, and strongly relieved the gray sky beyond. "It is of no use," reiterated Father Morris, and the whole party were preparing to retire, when suddenly a vivid light flashed upon them from the hill, and instantly a long line of torches seemed to stream along the horizon. "He is coming home! But will he write more tomorrow?" exclaimed the whole party simultaneously, for they knew well by experience the meaning of this signal. "He is coming home, thank God!" repeated Sir Ambrose, his pallid lips quivering, and every limb trembling with agitation. "Look to my father," cried Edric. "He will faint." "Oh, no, no," repeated Sir Ambrose. "Thank God, thank God!" "Well, lean upon me at least," said Edric affectionately. Sir Ambrose complied, and, supported by his son, still gazed anxiously on the torches, their red glare shedding the unnatural light around them, and making the surrounding darkness only appear still more intense. Thunder growled in the distance, and rain began to fall in large drops, yet still Sir Ambrose gazed upon the torches, and could not be persuaded to leave the terrace. These wild, fearful-looking lights gleaming through the tempest seemed a connection link between him and his darling son, and it was not till they were obscured by the thick, heavy rain, and even the outline of the telegraph vanished in the gathering clouds around, that he could be induced to seek for shelter. Sir Ambrose slept little that night. The sleep of age is easily broken, and perhaps the joyful agitation of his spirits had produced a slight access of fever. He rose with the dawn, and long before the rest of his family had descended, summoned Abelard, that he might dispatch him to inform his most intimate friend, the Duke of Cornwall, of the news. "Oh," he said, as soon as the drowsy butler made his appearance, "I'm sure the Duke feels nearly as great an interest in the success of Edmund as myself, and will not be displeased if he is disturbed a little earlier than usual upon such an occasion." "I obey," replied Abelard. "I will shake off my sullen propensities and speed with the velocity of the electric fluid to the castle of the noble chieftain." "Take heed you do not forget your message, by the way," repeated Sir Ambrose, smiling. "Not all the waters of the Lethe could wash such magnificent tidings from my memory," replied the butler. "Your honour's words are imprinted upon the magnetic organ of my brain, and the sensorium must be derived from my cerebellum ere they can be effaced." The Duke of Cornwall had been an intimate friend of Sir Ambrose almost from infancy. They had been companions at school and at college, besides which, peculiar circumstances which had happened in their youth had linked them together in indissoluble ties. What these circumstances were, however, no one exactly knew, except for the parties concerned, and they always avoided alluding to them. All that was generally understood upon the subject being that Sir Ambrose had, in some manner, been instrumental in saving the Duke's life, but how, when, or where, was never clearly explained. The Duke of Cornwall was of the royal family of England, and closely allied to the throne. His father had been brother to that prince who had so steadfastly refused the crown when it was offered to him by the ambassadors from the people, and as that prince left no male descendants, the Duke might be considered legitimately entitled to reign. The thought of disturbing by his claims the female dynasty now established had, however, never entered into his head that he would marry his daughter Elvira to Edmund Montague, and his niece Rosabella to Edric. He turned all his thoughts, plans, and wishes to the accomplishment of this object, and suffered no other idea to interfere with it. Those, however, who were acquainted with the characters of the young people thought the Duke had quite reversed the natural order of things by this arrangement, and that the strong mind and haughty spirit of Rosabella would have suited better the ambitious Edmund, whilst the soft, yielding disposition and feminine graces of Elvira seemed to harmonize exactly with the taste of the philosophic Edric. No persuasions, however, could induce the Duke to deviate in the slightest degree from his design. Like many of the higher classes of society in those days of universal education, he affected an excessive plainness and simplicity in his language, so much so, indeed, as sometimes almost to degenerate into rudeness, in order that he might be clearly distinguished from the elaborate and scientific expressions of the vulgar, and when urged upon the subject of those intended marriages, he would roughly say, "Don't talk to me, there's nothing like a little contradiction in the married life. If two people were to agree to live together, who were always of the same opinion, they would die of ennui in 6 months. No, I'm right, and so they'll find it in the end." He would then shake his head, and put on such a look of positive determination that his friends would generally retire in silence, feeling it perfectly in vain to attempt to alter his resolution. As to consulting the inclinations of the young people themselves, the idea never entered his imagination. "Children don't know what's good for them," he would reply sharply, if anyone presumed to suggest such a thought, "and it is the duty of parents and guardians to decide in such matters." Sir Ambrose, wishing the connection for his sons, and respecting even the whims of his friend, had as yet never interfered, and the young people had also appeared silently to acquiesce. Rebellious spirits, however, were hidden under the apparent calm, and the Duke was soon to learn from experience that human beings were rather more difficult to manage than a drove of turkeys, a flock of sheep, a fact of which he had not known the slightest suspicion. The Duke had already risen, and was in his garden when the messenger of Sir Ambrose arrived panting for breath, and quite exhausted from the velocity which, as he expressed it, he had employed in endeavoring to execute with the utmost expedition the implied wishes of his master. The Duke was surprised to see him. "What brings you so early, Abelard?" demanded he. "Oh, your grace," replied the butler, gasping for utterance. "The haste I have made was impeded my respiration, and the blood, finding the pulmonary artery free, rushes with such force along the arterial canal to the aorta that I'm in imminent danger of being suffocated." "Pshaw!" said the Duke. "Besides," continued Edward, "a saline secretion distills from every pore of my skin in a serious transmutation from the excessive exertions I have made use of." "And what has occasioned these violent exertions?" "The earnest desire experienced by Sir Ambrose to transmit with all the expedition possible to your grace the intelligence he has just received from the acquisition of a victory from Master Edmund in the hostile territory of Germany." "Victory!" shouted the Duke. "Victory! Rosabella! Elvira! Where are you girls? Here's tidings to rouse you from your slumbers. And how is Edward? Is the boy safe? God bless him! Victory will be nothing to us if we are to lose him." "It occasions me excessive chagrin," replied Abelard, "that I am totally unable to resolve that interrogatory to your grace's complete satisfaction. Taciturnity, however, upon such subjects is, I believe, generally considered synonymous with prosperity, and as Master Edmund, to the best of my credence, conveyed no information relative to his sanity in the communication made by him to his paternal ancestor, I humbly opine that there are no reasonable grounds for supposing it has suffered any material deterioration in consequence of the late sanguinary encounter in which he has been engaged." The Duke had not patience to wait for the conclusion of his speech, but hobbled away as fast as infirmities would permit, reciprocating for Elvira and Rosabella in a voice that he might have silenced Stunner, and Adelard, finding himself alone, was fain to follow his example, marveling as he went along, however, at the excessive impatience of the fiery spirits of the age, which would not permit people to remain stationary, even to hear what he called compendious replication to the very questions which they themselves had propounded. Whatever faults might fall to the share of the Duke of Cornwall, that of a cold heart was certainly not amongst the number. The delight he felt on hearing Edmund's triumph could not have been greater if the youthful hero had been his own son. His eyes, indeed, absolutely sparkled with transport when he communicated the intelligence to his niece and daughter, and his tidings were not bestowed upon insensible ears, for the breasts of both of the youthful auditors throbbed with pleasure at the news, though the causes of their emotions were different. Elvira had been the idol of Edmund's homage from her childhood. She fancied she returned his passion with equal fervor, but she deceived herself, as love was yet a stranger to her heart. Endowed with great beauty and superior talents, accustomed from her earliest infancy to be worshipped by all around her, surrounded by flatterers till even flattery itself had lost its charm, Elvira was as yet insensible to love. Why she was so, we leave to the philosophers to explain. We merely state facts, and leave others to draw conclusions. Rosabella's character was essentially different from that of her cousin. Passion was the essence of her existence, and her dark eyes flashed with a fire that bespoke the intensity of her feelings. She loved Edmund, but though she loved him with all of the overwhelming violence that only a soul like hers could feel, yet she would not have scrupled to sacrifice even him to her revenge, if she had thought he treated her with negligence or contempt. She scorned the opinion of the world, and regarded mankind in general but as slaves, whom she should honor by trampling beneath her feet. Ambition, however, was her leading passion, and even her love for Edmund struggled in vain for mastery against her. The feeling was now highly gratified by the tidings of Edmund's victory. She triumphed in his glory, and a deeper glow burnt upon her cheek, from the proud consciousness she felt that she had not placed her affections upon an unworthy object. "We have no time to lose, girls," said the Duke. "I would not miss being with Sir Ambrose when he receives a letter for kingdoms. Here, Hippolytus, Augustus, get a balloon ready, and let us be off directly. How tedious these fellows are! They might have removed the church steeple in the time they have wasted about that balloon." "If your grace would have a moment's patience," said Hippolyte, holding the cords of the balloon. But his grace has no patience. It was an ingredient nature had quite forgotten to put into his composition. And without waiting for the ascending ladder to get down, he sprang into the car in such haste the moment the balloon was brought to the door, that he was in imminent danger of oversetting it. So, he said. "Very well, that will do. And now, girls, that you are safely embarked, we will be off. Hippolyte, you will steer us, and Adelard, you go into the buttery, and let my fellows give you something to eat. You will want something after your fatigues. There, that will do. Don't let us hinder a moment." And the rest of his speech was lost in the air as the balloon floated majestically away. "It's often appeared very astonishing to me," said Adelard, after watching the balloon till it was out of sight, "to observe how partial great people are generally to aerial mode of transit. For my part, I think pedestrian matter infinitely more agreeable." "De gustibus non est disputandum," replied Augustus, the Duke's footman, to whom this observation was addressed. "But I think I observe symptoms of lassitude upon you, Mr. Adelard. Will you not put adjourn to the apartment of Mrs. Russell, our housekeeper, to repair by some aliment refreshery the excessive exhaustion you have sustained in the course of your morning's exertions?" "Willingly, Mr. Augustus. I own candidly, I feel the want of a little wholesome nutrition. I shall, besides, be extremely happy to avail myself of the opportunity fortune to benignantly presents of paying my respects to Mrs. Russell, whom I have not seen these 3 days." The worthy housekeeper was equally rejoiced with Adelard at his instance of the fortune's benignity, a sort of sentimental flirtation having been going on between them for the last 30 years. She accordingly stroked down her snow-white apron, readjusted her mob-cap, and smoothed her grey hairs, which were divided upon her forehead, with the most scrupulous exactness, before she advanced to welcome her visitors. "What will you take, my dear Mr. Adelard?" she said, as soon as he was within hearing. "What can you fancy? I have a delicious corner of a cold venison pastry in my pantry." "Words are altogether too feeble to express the transports of my gratitude at receiving so gracious an accolade, beauteous Eloisa," replied the romantic butler, for thus, in allusion to his own name, was he wont to call her. "But though you had only the rigours of the parcelet to invite to me, instead of the comforts of your well-stored pantry, still would words be wanting to express the feeling in my bosom on thus again beholding you." "Spare my blushes," said Mrs. Russell, casting her eyes upon the ground, and playing with the corner of her apron. "I feel a roseate suffusion glow upon my cheeks, and your flattering sense strikes upon the tympandium of my articular organs." "Oh, Miss Russell," sighed Adelard, gazing upon her tenderly. Then, after a short pause, he continued, "As to the ailments of which your provident kindness should soulage my appetite, though venison be a wholesome viand, and was reckoned by the ancients efficacious in preventing fevers, and though the very mention of a savoury pastry makes me appetite, usually employed in secreting the mucus of my tongue, erect themselves, thereby occasioning to overflow of the saliva, yet will I deny myself the indulgence and content myself simply with the boiled egg, as being more likely to agree with the present enfeebled state of my digestive organs of my stomach." "You shall have it instantly," cried Mrs. Russell. And will you have the kindness to superintend the culinary arrangements of it yourself? Rejoined Edward. I do not like the albumen too much congratulated, and prefer it without any nutritious oil, simply flavored by the addition of a small quantity of common muriate of soda. The egg was soon prepared and devoured. Thank you, dear Miss Russell, said Edward. This reflection was most acceptable. I have felt for some time the gastric juice corroding the coats of my stomach, and still, though I have now given it a solid substance to act upon, I think it would not be amiss to dilute the virulence by the addition of a little fluid. Have you anything cool and refreshing? I have some bottled beer, replied Miss Russell, but I am afraid the carbonic acid has not been sufficiently disengaged during the process of vinous fermentation to render it wholesome, and there is scarcely any alcohol in the whole composition. That is exactly what I want, said Edward, for my physicians have expressly forbidden stimulants, provided the gluten that forms the germ was properly separated in the preparation of the malt, and the seed sufficiently germinated to convert the fecula into sugar. I shall be perfectly satisfied. I can guarantee the accuracy of its preparation both with regard to the malt and the beer, repeated Mrs. Russell, and the frothing fluid soon flowed into a goblet, the infinite satisfaction of the thirsty butler, who, after a hearty draught, vowed nectar itself was never half so delicious, and that all the gods of Olympus would envy him if they but could taste his fare, and see the blooming Hebe that his cup bare.